Hey, Saber Legion, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Repost and Repost. I am your host, David Loudenslinger, and today we're going to be talking about another installment of fixing bad TSL habits. And today the topic is suicidal attacks. So I am excited to talk about this one because, in my opinion, um, this is well, it's the easiest to fix with the least amount of work, if that makes sense. Because the easiest fix for suicidal attacks is don't do them. But I want to try to break down the reason why my camera is going to go blank because I didn't hit record on it. Sorry, I'm still here. It's just if I don't hit record on this GoPro, it shuts off automatically. Sorry about that. Give me a second here. There, now I won't have it again. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Um, and Mark is here. So, hey, Mark. It is probably the most common one behind leading with your head. But again, it is also the most easiest to fix, right? Because the number one way to fix it is don't do it, right? Don't do suicidal actions. There's a reason they call it suicide. But I'm going to go a step further with that and talk about how the reasons why you shouldn't. Even if, say, you're an extremely fast, agile fighter and you can get these hits in, these suicidal attacks in before your opponent can counter you, there's numerous reasons, not just necessarily um, safety or anything like that, that is part of it, but there's reasons beyond that inside the fight. Um, and that's another thing that I'll talk about. So let's just see here. I just want to make sure everything is. It's what I get for being extra. I get it. I fully understand. It is my cross to bear. Hey, Alicia, how we doing? So, suicidal attacks. Trying to think if there's anything else update wise. We are about in 3 days. We are 2 months away from Combat Con and TSL 5. So if you are coming there, great. If you are watching it on the stream, great. There are going to be, lots of ways to participate in the TSL community um, as well. One thing I will note about today, we also have launched our Discord channel. I don't know that anybody's going to really join in from the Discord channel, but the live events chat in our TSL's new Discord server allows you to chat directly with me in there, and then it'll show up in the stream and everything. So yeah, I mean that's fine if you're still deciding. It's not an easy thing to decide. I mean, it's not one. It's not what is Discord. Talk to Joe. Talk to Joe, Mark. Uh, it is another form of social media in which to communicate. Primarily in the past has been used for gaming, but is starting to expand more to other types of communities like ours. So that is another solution. So, who is Joe? There is no Joe. Never existed. All in your mind. So, let's talk about. So, Combat Con, yes, make the decision if you want to. If you have questions about that, I would say Mark and myself of the Quarantine TV hosts have been to Combat Con multiple times. I probably, with the exception of out of the most active TSL members, I am probably the person who's gone to Combat Con the longest, because I went a couple years prior. There are people who have been going a long time that are part of TSL, but just saying like people that you can ask questions if you have questions about how Combat Con operates, tips and tricks. I have made many mistakes and things like that trying to plan out a Combat Con vacation. And I will gladly share them. And we're going to try to share them in another show as well. And then Kevin, even though he's on, Kevin should be using the Discord live events chat, but he is now a Facebook user because he is using the Facebook. So, all right. So, yeah, the Discord handle thing. We wanted to make sure that people knew each other. We didn't want the anonymity element that exists in a lot of communities. So that's why we required that, because we feel that when you're at least somewhat identifying yourself, that we tend to get less of those craziness that can occur in different communities. Same with Facebook and everything like that. So we're just trying to avoid a little bit the anonymity. See there. Okay. Kevin is on Discord now. See, that's how we can do it. And everybody can talk, and I can show everybody their stuff. So that is great. Who is Kevin? He's also in your mind, Mark. You are having a deep schizophrenic episode. So most of the people interacting with you and talking with you are not actually there. I am there, but I am selling you out to the Soviets, if you get the beautiful mind reference. So yes, Kevin is a figment of the internet. So I will get into the topic, and if you guys want to keep chatting about who is real and who is not, that's fine with me. So suicidal attacks. I'm going to pop over to the other side. Okay. So now that I have broken on through to the other side, yeah, I'm full of references today. Talk about suicidal attacks. A suicidal attack is pretty self-explanatory about what it is. It is a attack that you do where you are exposing another target or a very vulnerable target on your body, and you are not caring about the counter because you are trying to essentially get to your opponent first. So, for example, if I was trying to hit Bob, Bob doesn't have legs, but I'm going to hit him here. We'll just assume that's like kind of a leg sweep, right? If I go for a leg swipe and I just, I'm not covering or guarding or anything, and I just go like that, right? And I just like jump in. I'm not going to do this at speed because I am wearing jeans, so I can't necessarily do some of the crazy acrobatic elements. But essentially, like, yeah, if I'm like, do something like that, my head is completely exposed, right? That's a problem. I don't want to necessarily do that. But for some people, they see it as, well, if it's first to the touch, I just need to hit him before he hits me. If I need to hit, and Bob doesn't get the hit in time, great, I'm going to get the point. It doesn't matter if I took the hit. There's a couple reasons as to why that's a bad thing, and I will go into that. But some other common suicide attacks. I can't do a flying squirrel. So, but we know from TSL3 you could just dive at somebody. You can do, even a suicidal attack is like, I'm trying to be fancy and I spin, I try to hit, right? That's a suicidal attack. It's not even an effective suicidal attack because you're literally only doing it for vanity. You don't actually have a practical reason for doing it. At least with the leg sweep, I can say, oh, at least I understand why you're trying to sweep my leg. So that's a big element to think about. But anything where you are purposely exposing a targeted area, or even an untargeted area, to get the hit in first. Any type of jump, where I just like, just and try to hit Bob. Yeah, landed weird there. Again, I'm wearing jeans and it's a tight environment, so I'm trying not to do something dumb, but essentially, yeah, just anything like where I'm like, not this is like a normal hit, right? But if I'm like trying to do, something like this where I'm like, oh, I can hit him first down here because he's unguarded, and I expose my head completely or something like that. Um, Another one that's common is the slide. I'm not going to slide on this floor because mainly everything on that table where that contains the camera will topple. So but you get the idea of the slide where someone comes down, they slide in on their knee pads because they have these, you know, they have these lacrosse or hockey knee pads or something like that that feel real nice to slide in. They're on carpet, it doesn't matter. Um, that's another suicidal attack where you're trying to just slide in at the last minute. Can there be times where those will get points? Yes. Can there be times with certain people where they're more common to get points? Yes. But my argument is that one, you should never do an attack that exposes another area of your body that is more fragile. What I'm getting at is if you're doing a leg sweep and I expose the back of my head, yes, we have protection there. I've been hit in my back of head protection, and while it doesn't hurt that much, sometimes you can be hit and it hurts still. It hits at the right angle. It just causes a little bit of pain. It's a sensitive area. We don't want to cause a problem. You could expose your back and you get hit in the spine. Even though that's not a target, you have inadvertently exposed that part. Like so, that's another thing I would add to a suicidal attack. Any part where you're specifically exposing a target for the purposes of getting an offensive attack in first. And in our system, it does benefit that mentality a little bit because if I did that in HEMA, if I went to strike someone's leg and I took a shot to the head, a lot of times in a lot of systems, I would get 2 points to the leg. And then I took a hit in the afterblow timing and I would lose a point. Sometimes afterblows are 2 points in those systems. So if I sweep to the leg, I get hit in the head, 2, 2, 0. No benefit to that. I've exposed my head, which is definitely the most important part that I want to protect probably in my whole body. So there's no real advantage to it. The other thing is the other argument I'll make is that it's not necessarily safe for your opponent. Because you are not necessarily controlled. I have seen very few people who pull off acrobatic moves that do it in a safe manner that is considerate for their opponent. So, I said acrobatic moves. I didn't say suicidal attacks because, in my opinion, a suicidal attack is you are ignoring the safety of your opponent. And regardless of them being your opponent, we still want to keep them safe. Part of the agreement when we put on armor, when we grab these sabers and we salute each other, is we're saying, thank you for taking the time to spar with me or fight me. And then thank you for keeping me safe, and we're saying that to each other. We're making an acknowledgement that we're keeping each other safe. And by doing suicidal attacks, you are essentially violating that trust between you and your opponent. Accidents will happen and all of these things, but and there'll be those weird incidents where like you go to do something and they just move just at the right time and then bam, something bad happens. That's going to happen. There's no avoiding that. But you can reduce the amount of times that those things happen. Because the other thing I'll say is about suicidal attack fighters. They, if you do one move and you did it once and it was a once in a million, like the flying squirrel, right? We talked about Jesse at TSL 3 getting that diving shot in to send himself into overtime, right? He needed one more shot. And it was great. It's a wonderful moment. It helped put TSL on the map, give us a lot of great viral marketing and everything, right? Great brand identity. But beyond that, the move itself was not necessarily safe, right? But everybody shouldn't be doing that all of a sudden. But Jesse only does that typically once. I mean, he doesn't really do it that. He hadn't done it really commonly when we were all still fighting. He did it like once in a match occasionally. But what I'll say is, if you're one of those people that is just constantly doing acrobatic things because one, they look cool, or you saw it, choreographed in Star Wars or whatever, and you have no practical purpose for applying it, um, you're going to lose respect amongst people. Not going to take you seriously. Um, does that mean people are going to be mean to you and do these things? I would hope not, and I wouldn't either. But what I mean is that, like, if you want to be, if someone is putting on a good fight and is I guess the argument is to some people, it's you're not taking the fight seriously. And I know that sounds weird considering some of the flashy weird things we do in TSL, but what I'm talking about is overuse of it. I'm not saying we should never have somebody do a suicidal or an acrobatic attack. I'm saying overuse of it. If you're doing four, five, six, seven, eight, nine different, times, I mean, I would say four is too much in a fight. In a fight that you might have, what, 15, 16 exchanges. That's a quarter of the exchanges where you're doing something that is either A, potentially unsafe, B, unsafe for your opponent, unsafe for you, B, not advisable as far as like within the context of the fight, um, and just not necessarily the best action you could take, right? So that's my argument about that, and I know that is probably flies in the against what some other people may think. Um, I am not referring to people who are acrobatic who know how to move like Daniel Lane, because Daniel Lane knows how to move. I can trust that his acrobatic movements are controlled, and he understands it in the context of a fight. Is it always effective for him? No, and that's the other reason why I don't recommend them as much. But they're fun to do occasionally. There's cool things that you can do, and sometimes you can pull off really interesting things, right? But for the most part, you're pretty much talking a standard fight. We shouldn't have every fight where someone is airborne, because there's more risk associated with that. Every time you jump into the air and you land on your knees and you land at a weird angle and you turn your knee, like there's a risk each time you do that, right? If you look at someone who doesn't do a whole lot of acrobatics, right, and is a fairly, a fairly effective, like I don't want to say standard style, but is Alan Block, right? Occasionally he'll do like a jump, like one of his famous ones is him jumping over a leg sweep that Jimmy did and knocking him in the head. And keep in mind that was in response to a suicidal leg sweep where Jimmy exposed his head. So that's an example of using those acrobatics against a suicidal attack. So let me just check the chat real quick here. All right, let's see. All right. All right. Kevin said, I can see them as desperation, but yeah, it's vanity, like spins and such. And Alicia says, sweep the leg. I do not like leg sweeps. Personally, there are applications for them, but they are much more limited than a lot of people think, if that makes sense. What about flourishes? Flourishes are different. So flourishes are different because that is literally you just doing a flourish of your saber, right? You're just doing a maneuver that looks nice, maybe switching hands or something like that, right? But you're not doing anything to specifically go into the attack or the attack zone or into the seeking distance of you're not, or seeking distance is the wrong word, but you're not moving into the close distance of your opponent to specifically worry about that. So that's what I would say about flourishes. When I asked why epee then saber, I was told the epee allows to work through double kills. Once you can hit with being struck, I can give you the saber. You have enough control to not crack a skull. That's a perfectly valid way to think about it, because if you can't yeah, the amount of you should not be getting super amount of doubles. If the amount of simultaneous strikes or double hits that you're getting in our sport, and you're doing a lot of these suicidal attacks, then you should not necessarily be doing as many suicidal attacks. And I have more to say about it, but I just wanted to look at the chat because I knew people would say, yeah, without being struck. Uh, I'll say it. People should never do suicidal or acrobatic attacks. I don't want to say never because they do lead to some interesting, and I am the head that the lead for media marketing. So I will say they do sometimes lead to interesting moments, but um, I think when they occur organically, they are much more interesting. Like I'll give you an example. Um, I think it was Saber Resolution 2020. The last CS event in Minnesota, where Jerry Hazard fought uh, Charlie. Um, Jerry got disarmed. Um, Charlie showed control, and he eventually got the point for this. But regardless, Jerry reached, lunged, and kind of like struck up his saber to hit Charlie, and it was a fun move. It wasn't incredibly dangerous, but it was a fun move. It looked cool in the moment. It was exciting, um, and it didn't endanger anybody, right? Um, Another reason I'm against these kind of like just attacks is just because of I've been hit by I've been hit by suicidal attacks, and they've caused minor injury, nothing long term, but just stuff where it's just like, are you kidding me? You did that thing, and then like I'm the one with like now like I got hit in the throat, or like I took a bruise on like under the like right here, or something like that. So like I've been a victim of those dumb idiotic attacks sometimes, so maybe I'm a little um, and then Christian said leg strikes seem to be the most common suicidal strike. It is the most common among beginners, I would say, in really any sport. I see it in single stick. Well, you don't see it much in rapier, but that's just because we tell everyone to hit here or here primarily, and then the legs tend to come later, and then the cutting actions come later. But I see it in longsword. I've seen it. I don't fight longsword, but I've judged a lot of longsword. I see those leg strikes. I see it in something like sword and buckler, where you can defend with one side, so they like to sweep low. So they kind of do like a sweep low. Um, no, I know sweep the leg was a movie reference. I understand that. I just it was a reference to the Karate Kid, but I was just I guess I have a problem with that. If you get my reference, so flourishes are for flourishes' sake is also dumb. Well, Mark, but I you gotta you gotta understand that like there is a balance to what we do, and if the flourish is not, in my opinion, if the flourish is not causing any danger whatsoever, and if someone wants to do a crazy move and it looks good, that's fine. If they can back it up with fighting skill, that's more impressive. Um, Flourishes for flourishes' sake can be dumb because a lot of times people do flourishes and they've learned them, and they have literally no fighting ability to back up that kind of display, that cool display of skill. They don't have cool technical skill to back it up. If you see me do a flourish, there are things I can do with it. I have pulled off one or two flourishes uh, in a fight that are kind of fun. So um, I never said good sir. Well, whatever. Either way. Okay. So, and then legs aren't targets. I mean, that's a good way to think about it. I don't think of the leg as a target. I have hit the leg most of the time. I have hit the leg as a result of a second or third intention. Because if we're here and then I strike down here, maybe I get deflected, and that's like, well, there the leg is the closest target, and I hit the leg, and I do something like that. That's 9 times out of 10 when I'm going to hit somebody's leg. Um, there are fun ways to do it. There are fun ways to incorporate leg attacks, but in reality, I like I say, I just tend not to think about it as a target. primarily because I will prefer to thrust as opposed to cut. And Mark does too. So hitting the legs is not a target because you can technically hit with a thrust in the knee and shin area, but if you hit the foot, you're in trouble. If you hit the thigh, you're in trouble. If you hit the torso, you're in trouble. So um, you know, if they are leading with the leg, why isn't it a target? That is from Donnie. Um, let's see. I will talk about that. Let me flip over. If they are leading with the leg, why aren't they a target? It can be, but you don't need to sacrifice your ability to protect yourself and to be in a good stance to get that point, right? So what I'm saying is, okay, if someone is fighting you, right, and they're just saying I'll just say a two-handed stance, and their leg is way out here, they're doing one of these deep lunging kind of things, right? Um, you know, yes, their leg is a target. Now, there's two elements to that. Certain people, if you see their leg out and they're specifically like back here, like, hey, take my leg, take my leg. There are people setting you up, right? They're setting you up to just hit you, like go for the leg because I'm just going to slip it back and I'm just going to hit you. And then there's the people that just do it and don't think about it, right? If you're going to go for the leg, and like I say, I typically don't recommend it unless somebody steps super close into distance where if I can do that, if I can do this and hit someone, obviously this is a shorter blade, but if I have my full length, if I do this and I can hit someone like that, cool, great, right? That's great. If they're going to get that close to me and I can hit the leg, great. If I can do that and hit the leg, great. Making sure that there's nothing hitting me in the head here, right? When want to go for it? I would go for it in the context of you can stay upright, right? The second that head is leaning to drop to hit somebody's leg, that is when you've changed from a simple leg sweep to a suicidal attack. So as soon as you go like this, no. If you have to drop your head, and I don't even like this, but I would only personally, if I was going to sweep the leg and I was going to drop my head down, only way I would do it is in a reverse lunge, meaning I step back and I do that. But I still don't like it because my head's further forward than if I was here and I could sweep at the head, right? Because I'm still not balanced because my weight is pulling me forward. But if I'm up here, I can do this. And really the difference, we're talking about like an inch difference between like that and that. And it's not enough for the imbalance that it creates. So if the leg is there, it makes sense. If the leg is, but only if the leg is in distance specifically. Sorry, let me turn that off here. So only if the leg is in distance. So like if I'm going to sweep at the leg, good. I'm okay here, right? And if it's a full length blade, turn this on for right. And then but if I am doing this, my weight is way forward. There's no way I can get back. If the blade comes down, there's nothing I can do. Maybe I can hit, but I have created an imbalance that is not an acceptable option. That is the time in which to sweep the leg. Only when it is, in my opinion, I would use the leg as a feint or something like that, where like I could go, and go, where they think I'm going to hit the leg, and I go like that, right? So like I indicate leg, right, or I indicate leg and I cut up, right, right. There's different things you could do. You can't really move that quickly you could with two-handed, so you could go, or so, and I just cut up, right? So I can easily do that. And honestly, that's the majority of the very few leg times I get points for a leg shot is when I'm doing this kind of cut, right? And I'm just cutting up. So I would hit them in the torso or something like that, but just happened to be their leg was there first. Like leg sweeps, I do not. That is the biggest suicidal attack that exists. Everybody thinks it's a target. If you try a leg sweep on me, I've done it to so many people, and I'm not even like even not even purposely trying to cheat out my leg, but like if someone tries a leg sweep on me, I'm doing what's called the slip, where I slip my foot back. I slip and I hit, right? I slip and I hit. Like that's what I'm going to do. I'm literally just going to sweep it back and do that, right? And those slips are very easy to learn, and they're very easy to pull off once you have your understanding of balance. Like I said, the most common are like where you slip and you hit overhead. It's very common in single stick, where I'm like, say I'm here, right, in a hanging guard, and they sweep at my leg, and I go like this, and I sweep down and I hit them in the head, right? There's also ones where I pull my leg up a little more and like kind of kick my own butt. I mean, literally. So there's different options there. So consider that that there's different solutions to figure that out. So what was I going to say? I was going to talk about why, in the context of a fight, it is not success. So, all right. So I said that on average, there's somewhere between 15, maybe 20 exchanges within a fight. It could be less depending, but let's just assume it's a fairly even match. We're not really worried about a blowout or something like that. But in a fight, there's like 15 to 20 exchanges, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. Of those that are, suicidal, overly aggressive attacks, go back and look at matches, because I've looked at a lot of matches. I mean, a lot of them. Tell me how many suicidal attacks you've seen pulled off more than 2 times. I'll bet you majority of the matches that you see are either A, not very close in the end, um, or B, were not really successful, right? Um, like in the long run, like meaning there wasn't a whole lot of variation outside of those suicidal attacks. There wasn't a whole lot happening from that fighter that was performing it. And that's very true. You know, once people know that you're the person that sort of just jumps in, slides in, does crazy things, does a flourish where they're just going to like keep flourishing and they're just going to keep trying to hit, you know, people are going to learn your pattern, and they're just going to do, the very common things of like, well, if you're just going to, do this repeatedly, right? I'm just going to time it so when you're here and then bam, I'm going to stab you in the face, right? Essentially, Indiana Jones, the guy, has the weapons, the sword and everything, and he pulls out the gun and bam. So that's, that's pretty much the easiest thing to think about. Like it's just that if you can go like that, I mean, that's a common movie trope too. It's like the guy comes in and he does all these things like with a nunchuck or some other weapon, and then like and they're like, and they pose, and the guy just goes bam. That's what's going to happen with the majority of the flourishes. That's probably one of the most realistic aspects um, of a lot of movie choreography is someone overly flourishes and the person just stabs, punches, whatever, depending what they're doing, cutting, just interrupting that timing, because you create a pattern when you're doing those flourishes. Now, I said I pulled off one. The one flourish that I've most proud that I pulled off was essentially I only start the flourish out totally out of distance. So I will say this is the only time I do it, and I will do this. I will never do this in a serious fight or when the fight is not already lost. So like if you watch TSL 4 in the finals, I was down 3 points near the end. Um, I knew that there were only 10 or 5 seconds remaining or something like that. So I knew there was no chance I could get 3 points within that time frame. So I basically, you see me just go bam, and then I like went like that. Didn't work in that context, but essentially I have pulled off that. Essentially where you go like this and then bam. So that's the Obiani. And then on this, I either bring it up or I do this and I bring it up like that. Those are kind of the two moves that I've done where I've made contact. And a lot of times what that is that I do it and then I slow it down or speed it up. So I can slow it down or speed it up. So if I go, and then I time it for the person to step in. So if a person steps in, and that's the only one you'll ever see me really do. Other than maybe occasionally, yes, you'll see me do like things that look like flourishes, but they're essentially just movement between different guards and cuts. So you might see me go, one, and then I do something like this, and then bam, bam, But all of those things are cuts, right? I did a cut, drew a false edge, right? I did a false edge and a cut, and then I cut up or something like that. I'm making it up right now, but that is more of an actual offensive flow as opposed to a acrobatic flow. So the other things with the suicidal attacks, like I say, the slide, the baseball slide one, is the one I hate the most, because two things will happen. If your opponent stabs you and you're moving in like that and you have no ability to stop because you're sliding on your knees, you're going to take a shot there and that's going to hurt. Um, and that is never a fun time. So the main reason also though is, if I'm fighting you and you're doing suicidal things, right, and I do a stab and I hit you in an untargeted area because of the way you're moving, right? Like I go to aim for your head and then or go to aim for your chest, and hit you with a thrust, and then you duck down and you're like lunging in like with these jumps, right? And then I hit you like say in the clavicle or in the neck. I'm going to feel bad doing that, even though I had no intention. You literally expose that point. It's just not that is not proper etiquette for your opponent, because you want your opponent to keep you safe, and I try to do that. So why? So by doing things where you lose control of what you're capable of doing, your forward movement, your whatever kind of movement you're doing. Most of the time, it's forward motion, right? You have then made yourself more vulnerable, um, even though I'm still trying to keep you safe within the parameters. I see it also with the spin, right? People try to do a spin and they do something like this, right? And they literally expose the entire back of their body. If you start that spin and I was already cutting, right? And then that cut comes in and bam, hits me on the side of the head and I take a hit, that's not, it's not really honorable for you to do something like that and put it on your opponent if they should be skilled enough to strike you in that. And it doesn't take a lot of skill to hit someone who's doing these acrobatic attacks because it's extra time anyway. But don't put that on them. Keep them safe. So if you're going to do things that are considered uh, acrobatic, don't make them suicidal. Make sure that one, you have absolute control over what you're doing, and two, that you're doing it safely, and three, you can also see sometimes certain people are very uncomfortable around that. I'm not necessarily uncomfortable around it. I can fight it, but there are people who are newer who might be just traditionally trained. Maybe they took like a few months of like longsword or something. They show up to a tournament and some guy's doing crazy maneuvers. That's intimidating, and yeah, so maybe that's a strategy or something like that. But it's just, you shouldn't do intimidating by making someone feel unsafe, right? I mean, I remember I went to a rapier tournament at one point, and rapiers, let's agree. And then, majority of the things you're going to do with a rapier is you're going to stab somebody, right? I see this big guy. I mean, it's like a big burly guy, and he essentially comes out. He's in his guard. They say fight, and what does he start doing? He starts going. He literally starts just cutting like this at someone, literally, and while like rushing in at someone. Now think of this: like if you're heck, if you're my size, I was not fighting this guy. This is something I witnessed. You're my size, and you see a guy that's 100 pounds bigger than you, and he is, he looks like a strong guy, and he's cutting at you like that, like just with just disregard. And I'm keeping it under control because I can't hit my side. But if he's just, and I'm talking about like he was using his arm. He's not like here. I'm using my wrist to do it. He was using his like arm, and he was just like basically doing a figure four. I mean, he was just with a metal rapier that is not necessarily intended. The cut would only get him 1 point if he got the cut. And most cuts require you to cut and then draw. So like imagine being that opponent who has to like deal with that. Yes, with rapier, stab him in the face, right? But that's a very intimidating thing for not decent technique, right? You can be intimidated by good technique. That'll happen all the time. I get intimidated by good technique. Everybody should. But bad technique that makes you feel unsafe is much it's just I don't think it's okay. So that's my piece on that. So let's take a look here. Bam. All right. Yeah, and answering, I did answer that question about leading with the leg, and it makes your head a huge target. When you're talking about the Vitruvian Man, I don't know what you're referring to, Mark. So let's see. All right, Jason is here. Jason from Wisconsin. Slides are excellent for shots to the mask. Yes, if you want to present your mask to your opponent, the slide is the best way to get that mask. If you're looking to retire your mask with a nice dent, slide is a great way to make it happen. So let's see. Just look at when David Ortiz fought Jesse at Dark Watch for why it's a bad idea. I don't remember what happened. I don't remember what happened in that. That was a while ago. So enlighten me, Mark. Shots to the mask can also be hella rude and make people a bit punchy. Yeah, no, shots to the mask. Yes, if you take a shot like that to the head, if you slide in at somebody, they smack you in the head, you might be upset with them. But in reality, they did the thing to protect themselves, and you did the dumb thing of like trying to make it a freaking baseball slide or something like that, or like you're a dancer in Saturday Night Fever or something like that. So let's that's either way, it creates an unsafe environment. If both fighters are amped up and upset, not the best environment. Mark said, I've had two people try spins against me, neither in competition. One spun into a cut of mine that landed square in his kidneys and dropped him. The other ended up getting stabbed in the ribs under the armpit. People should always fight with their own safety in mind. So, and the director didn't make the fencer chill. I can see them getting hurt if the whole arm is behind the cut. Oh wait, I've been in that tournament. There was no call by that director. I'll say like I was spectating at this tournament, and I did not see any specific correction on that. Now, granted, he didn't win that. The big guy didn't win the match. Nothing happened. That I don't even think that he might have gotten one cut off, but it got hit in an afterblow anyway because he was, But yeah, it's just that is always my example of like that is the most insane technique I've ever seen with a weapon that is not designed for like if you want to cut like that with a weapon similar to rapier, you should be fighting side sword. You should not be fighting with a rapier because it's not really designed for it. So let's see. It's that naked dude in the circle with his hands out. I don't know. I don't know what you mean. You mean like the Vitruvian? No, I know what the Vitruvian Man thing. I was more I was more referring to. I didn't know what he meant. The Vitruvian Man comment was in reference to the leg attack shortening the range along the circle. And then with the David Ortiz and Jesse thing, it held long point and tracked Jesse on the way down, jamming him in the collarbone. Okay, yeah, that's exactly why the slides and stuff like that tend not to work. So um, if someone's let me hit them in the head, then they deserve it. I mean, that's correct, and that's part of the thing. I mean, I've been in tournaments where someone's gotten hurt as a result of them doing something stupid, and then their opponent hit them. It's not fair to that person that hit them when someone graciously exposes a part of their body and they make the shot, and then they have to feel bad because they hurt somebody. Actually, I'll talk to a scenario of mine. I actually it's the only time that I was in a fight that definitely caused injury, albeit not necessarily my fault. And I'll explain on that one. So let me just put this up here. I will explain it in the context of, so it was a single stick tournament. I had watched this guy fight we were in the pools. I had watched this guy fight in a couple different ways. Basically what he did was he was at times you could just tell he would do things where he would try to get these cuts, and then he'd stumble, and like he was very unsure on his feet. So he wasn't incredibly balanced, right? So I was here. I think we were just kind of feeling each other out again, single stick. So you're kind of up here. At one point, I did a feint to the right, and he bit on it and tried to block it. Right. So I basically went here, and then I brought my blade around, and I literally took a step out, and then I cut to his head. So it's basically like bam, bam. It was probably some of the best technique I've ever pulled off in a tournament. I knocked him in the head because he was already leaning one way, and I knocked his head. He leaned, and then he put out his elbow like this. Bam, separated his shoulder, and then he couldn't continue. And that fight didn't count because he couldn't continue. I won, but I didn't win by the points because not everybody in the pool was able to fight that guy. So even though I was dominating that fight, I didn't get the benefits of it. So, but basically, that is an example of I felt bad that I had caused this guy, and he didn't even necessarily do anything suicidal. But I'm just trying to give an example of where I felt bad that this guy separated his shoulder. Again, granted, it was apparently a previous injury. But you know, and I'm still mad about that. That happened years ago. I'm still mad about that because one, if he was that unsure on his feet, he shouldn't have been fighting. You got to know your body. If you're constantly stumbling around, know when to pack it in. Know when to call it a day. You shouldn't be doing it. That's not safe, and it led to an injury for him. Um, and I wasn't doing anything particularly, crazy, and he didn't do anything particularly crazy. It was literally just I got some good technique, got him to bite to one side, bam, knocked him in the head, and he fell down. Now, granted, he fell wrong because he fell like this, so he fell onto his elbow, so everything pushed into his shoulder. If he had fallen in a different fashion, that's a different argument, but or a different thing to consider. But um, I still feel bad that I injured this guy, and probably caused a lot of rehab for him and stuff like that. But there's literally nothing I did, right? He presented, he presented the target to me. I made a wonderful hit, and but it nevertheless caused an injury. So that is an example of when there was no suicidal attacks, but he wasn't necessarily sure of himself. People do suicidal attacks and then they don't have this, they lose that control. So he didn't have control over his balance. People do suicidal attacks, and regardless of who they are, when they do these suicidal attacks, they, they lose control over what they're capable of doing. The baseball slide being a perfect one, right? You can slide and you can think that you're going to slide, this much, right, from when you hit the ground. You could maybe slide this much. You could, catch on something and you only slide this much. And you don't know if your opponent's going to step into you at that moment, and then you're going to take out their legs, and then they're going to trip over you. These are all bad examples of how to properly keep someone safe in a fight. Which is why I'm going to say the easiest way to fix a suicidal attack is not do them. That does not mean you can never should sweep the leg, but if you sweep the leg, you do not do it in a suicidal way. Does that ever mean you should never go aerial, jumping into the air? No. There are historical points in which you should jump. You can jump in the air. Um, I mean, literally, I remember explaining when we talked about broadsword was that if you should lose your balance, right? That if like you get tipped too far over and you're fighting with a broadsword, that you can literally push yourself up and launch yourself up, and that's a jump, and that's a valid historical technique out of who was the one I did, McBain. So there's different times for those things, but that's done in a safe manner, right? I didn't jump at my opponent. I didn't do anything particularly like irresponsibly unsafe. I didn't tip my head in. I didn't expose the back of my head. I didn't expose my back. I didn't like do something where I'm going to land weird and blow out my knee, or like, land weird, not have balance, right? Um, and actually, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll wrap up the discussion. Um, One thing that you might see me do, and I'll literally call out a technique because I've been asked about this, um, and so you'll see me a lot of times, thrust out, and then I like tagging the elbow, um, and you'll see me kind of like go like that, right? And I'll kind of rush a little bit, right? What I will say about that is, in the wrong hands, that's a suicidal attack. Sometimes you'll see me and I'll go past, and my opponent will have stepped aside, and you'll see me kind of just like go like this, right? And I might go a little bit further, and it seems like I'm like running right out of the ring. I can stop on a dime if I needed to. If it called for it in that context, if they had stepped into my target and I hit them, and then I can stop on a dime. I've practiced that. I know what I'm doing. And there are times when people have said they felt unsafe, and you know what I do? I don't do that attack with those people. I've done it in sparring and stuff like that. Um, so it's not necessarily like that is a scenario of like where I could theoretically be called out on doing a suicidal attack that is not necessarily suicidal, because I do have control over the situation. And if someone should feel unsafe, I'm very aware of what my opponent's doing. But at any point, I can stop, I can pivot, I can turn. When I slide, when I jump, when I lower my head, I cannot control some of those actions, right? When I slide on my knees, I cannot control that. I have lost an element of control. When I am here and passing forward against somebody, I have a degree of control. At any point where my leg hits the ground, I can pivot, I can stop, I can step, right? I could do something like that. There are multiple things that I can do. So I just want to point that out, because if someone sees this and they go back to my old fights and they look at it and they're like, oh, look, he's a hypocrite because he says no suicidal attacks and he does this all the time. You also notice I don't do it as commonly anymore, because judges don't see it half the time, because they don't see the little tap to the elbow. So, as Joe said, applying the correct, they deserve to be hit if you let them hit in the head. Make good life choices seems to be the theme of this episode. Make good life choices and consider the safety of yourself and the safety of your opponent, or partner, in this case. And I know we say opponent at times, but you know, let's see. But a lot of times it's so true about. Yeah, it's from Jason. Especially if wearing a Packers themed mask. Yeah, if they're wearing a Packers themed mask and you're not, and I guess you're not a fan of the Packers, and I guess that would be what, you're a Vikings fan. I don't know, or a Bears fan. Uh, I'm trying to remember football rivalries because I don't really pay attention to the NFL other than Eagles Cowboys because I'm from Philadelphia. So uh, like Goku Raccoon Goku. Sorry, I saw an opening that just screamed attack, so I did. I don't get the Dragon Ball reference because I don't watch it, but it makes sense. Also, with your thrusting rush, move past them so you're creating distance and you try to move their blade offline. What you're doing isn't as simple as it looks. That is correct. It is not as simple, and which is why I don't recommend people do that. And it doesn't always work. Like honestly, I could point to 5, 6 different fights where I do it, I get the hit, and I do get the hit, and it's never called because it's very subtle. So just keep that in mind. Cool. And Christian, yeah, there's Christian saying, for the record, I felt safe when you pulled those on me. Yeah, I mean, I've only encountered someone saying they don't feel comfortable with it in the context of free sparring. Never encountered it in a fight. It honestly depends on the opponent too, because there's 9 times out of 10 I don't need to do those, um, and it just depends. I mean, that's kind of the style that Mark has dubbed two-handed rapier. Um, and I do that because I understand the context of exactly where I am. So one thing you'll notice when I do those, I am moving off the line. I am not moving directly at my opponent. If I was extending out and aiming for their chest or head, and I was rushing at them, big no, suicidal, and I should be called by director for that. But again, I am moving off the side to hit the arm, elbow, hand kind of thing. So that is what is happening there. So, all right. Did I answer all the questions? Because we're going on about an hour, so I want to wrap up because I am going to my HEMA school. They got some prototypes of the Pro Gauntlets, so I'm going to film some fighting, and I'm going to have hopefully have a video of fighting with LED sabers with the Pro Gauntlets, and some first observations of it. And obviously, not a detailed review, but so I gotta make sure I get dinner and do that. So I can't stay on forever. So if there are questions about suicidal attacks, let me know now. If there are other questions about training, I will not go into a 15 to 20-minute soliloquy on it, but I can answer them. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, Combat Con's about 2 months away. I will. One of two things will happen with next week's episode. I will not be going live on Thursday. What I might do is I might go live on Wednesday, but it depends on how much time I like, personally, if I can wrap up work and stuff like that. So I don't know if I'm going to go live at all next week. So there might be a chance I might not be live next week, but don't panic because on next Thursday um, I'm filming an underground episode. Um, so I'm doing that. So I gotta focus on that and make sure that gets done. So and as Mark said, the Pro Gauntlets might be the best gloves ever, but at that price, they might as well be the worst. Um, there are some things, and I've already looked at something. There are some things that definitely do not work with our weapons, and I will point them out. So that's what's going on there. So um, yeah, there's good things and bad things. I noticed that like the bands that hold on to that hold the shell, the hard shell, to the underglove. They actually have one of the bands broke, and they had to tape it on the prototype. So that happened, I think, after some like longsword sparring. Um, yeah. So Joe wants to panic for me not being live next week, and that's okay. So, and then I'm hoping they may come down in price a bit much for me right now. Yeah, I have not bought them. I make that clear. I have my coning gloves, and they are still working for the time being. If I had to get replacements because the conings don't exist anymore, I probably would be looking at like the Infinity gloves or something like that. Most likely, I'm just basically looking for something that, like, for the majority of shots, I'm not going to feel much at all. Like, I'll feel it, but it's not, in the occasion of a hand shot, I'm not going to feel much. Mainly just because I want to avoid any injuries. I don't want bruises or anything like that to my hands, and I don't really want the spec. I don't need something to the level of the spec mittens, right? My preference would be something that I could fight with longsword as well, just or longsword level sparring. But there's not really a decent option outside of, like, I mean, if you there, I know there's the Thok weapon masters that are coming out as well. That's another one that was kind of like delayed for a long time. So I don't know what's going to happen with those. I'm interested in those too, but I want to see them in action first before I will not buy any gloves of the first generation because, or at least until people have properly looked at them, because there's always something that is going to be like a deal breaker for me. So the Konings, the generation ones that they had, they were way too bulky, right? They just didn't work. And then so I got the second gens, right? Um, the I'm trying to think of other examples, but that's like one example. So I want to. There's always something that people will see. So okay, Donnie asked gauntlets versus Suba. You should have both. The Suba. We just had a conversation about this on the Facebook group. The Suba provides no real difference in weight, and provides those little advantages of providing a minimal protection for your hands. I do not see a reason for not having a Suba. Um, that's pretty much it. In my opinion, you should not go cheap on gloves. You should always get something, at the very least, like the lowest level of like protection would be like the Red Dragons. Now, granted, the quality on those can be hit or miss. Or like Mark has some higher quality lacrosse gloves that are like a little over 100. Those would be like the entry level ones I would look at, and then you start to move into things like the sparring glove. Whether you get the mittens, don't get the 5 finger one, but the mittens or the sparring glove, infinity gloves. Um, those are the main ones I would look at from there. So it's just, you definitely still want hand protection, because even with my Konings, which are rated for longsword, there are times that things just get in, or like maybe sometimes somebody cuts and I'm running close and I take a Suba shot to it, and guess what? It, like, I feel it, but it doesn't injure me, right? So it doesn't hurt. So that's the basic thing. So all right. So yeah, Mark said both. Christian said, "Don't block with your hands." Definitely don't block with your hands, but still have gloves good enough. When I say gloves good enough, it's just because we allow entry level lacrosse gloves, but the entry levels I would in no way recommend, because there is just too many gaps along the edges of your hands and the fingertips. Even if you put fingertip protectors in, the edges of your hands, like especially right here where I'm grabbing a saber, you're going to take shots here. This is a common area where you might take a shot in the hand and you will feel it and it will hurt. That's why there's better lacrosse gloves above the entry level ones. Joe might be brave and try the infinity gloves. No snapping. Don't know what that's referring to. Thok Vapor. The Thok are actually on shipping in like a couple months or something like that. I don't know. I have a friend who was on the Thok Kickstarter, years and years ago. So I mean, Pro Gauntlets are like 7 years, removed from when they first started shipping. So yeah, that's they have started to ship. We'll see if those are good or not. I need better stuff for military saber. Also, again, we'll have to wait for a couple months. Yeah, I mean the infinities are supposed to be like military saber good, but in my opinion, from fighting in a military saber tournament, you need longsword level gloves. Do not go less than that, unless you have a saber that has full handguard protection, not just like a like a gymnasium saber or a 1796, where like you just have like a little cutout or something like that, where there's a minimal knuckle guard. Um, do not skimp on those because man, the amount of injuries I saw for people that had just barely longsword level gloves, in that it was just those things hit harder than people think. So um, let's see here. Donnie asks, "Do you consider changing grip mid-match a flourish?" No, no. Changing grip, and even if it's a a visually appealing methodology of changing grip, no. I mean, if you're not doing it obnoxiously, I mean, if you were trying to do something like, "Oh, I'm just going to go, and I'm going to do this, and then I change my grip," yeah, that's obnoxious. But if it's something like, even like I would say a half spin down there, so that's not a big deal. So you love your AOC Visbys. I'm gonna have to see them, Mark, before I jump on that. The way you showed them, like you speak highly of them, but I'm very I, I'm very particular that if there is there if something if I'm trying to use a product, and this is any product, it's not just related to this sport. If there's something that just triggers me on it, like I will not want to buy it whatsoever. Like I'll give you an example, like GM vehicles. Like my in-laws have like what do they have, a Chevy Traverse or something like that. I forget the exact thing they have, but there are so many little things that I despise about that vehicle, just minor things that you won't encounter a whole lot of times, right? um, like the interaction with the entertainment system and how many taps it takes to change certain things, that drives me insane, that I will never buy. I will second guess before I ever buy a GM vehicle. I will have to rigorously test it out before I would consider buying a GM vehicle. And that's nothing to do with even how the car drives. I'm talking literally just how I interact with the car, like say the entertainment system or something like that. So that's like something I gotta, that's just something I do. I'm very extra. So all right. So really depends on how you do it. Probably not. You probably shouldn't just stick with one and get good with that. I mean, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about I fight two hands and then I go to one hand, I do that all the time. Where I fight two hands and then one hand I'm grabbing at the end of the pommel. So let's see. I love the chat though. I do love the chat. I'm glad everybody is talking. So now pro gauntlets are extra. Um, They are a little bit, but they are. I'll tell you, they are very comfortable and very misleading about the amount of protection they provide for how light and um, invisible they feel, if that makes sense. So once the military saber, that was people with sabers treating it like Messer or single stick. It was adjacent to military saber from the footage I've seen. Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't like your fancy Italian saber tournaments where like I would say um, they are less aggressive. There was definitely a lot of people who treated it like they were fighting with a Messer or something like that. So depends on the military saber. Olympic sabers, I wear leather gloves, 20 millimeter lacrosse. Yeah, but the Olympic sabers have a full bell on them and they are tiny. I'm talking about military saber in the context of like the ones with an actual like blade and stuff like that. So yeah, if it just has the thin like Olympic saber thing, yeah, you don't need heavier gloves. I just mean like if you go fight in the combat con tournament, saber tournament, have some heavier gloves. I mean, I wore my Konings and that was enough. That was just right. Um, I know other people that wore like the Spess heavy mittens and they actually fit in the guard and it worked. So, um, and Joe says, accept the extra. And Alicia says, right now, what I have is fine for a basket hilt, but we'll upgrade gloves for a ribbon hilt and small sword. I've coveted a tall war for longer than I care to say. Yeah, I mean, I glove upgrades are, I don't do it a lot. I mean, the last gloves I bought were the Konings in 2017. I had the Red Dragons before that. The Red Dragons worked pretty well. Um, they didn't have the maneuverability that I would want for the lack of protection they gave, if that makes sense. So they sacrificed a lot of maneuverability for only a little bit of an upgrade. The Konings, I feel, offer a great level of protection and don't limit maneuverability quite as much. So that's why I like them. The dumb black fencer ones, yes, it's like the black fencer, like 1796, I think is what they used. I think I can't remember exactly, either 1796 or the gymnasium, but I'm pretty sure it was 1796. Um, that's what we used. Yeah, they just had like the C guard or whatever you want to call it on knuckle guard, and that was it. I did block with it once, and that was kind of fun. Um, you know, I do prefer military sabers with the slight curve in it because in that tournament it was one of the few times where I could do a false edge parry with a metal weapon and it worked really well. And I actually so that was a fun that was a fun thing. Mainly because I worked the false edge parry. There was a guy who came in and I knew he was already a top tier fighter in other weapons, and I knew he was going to sweep our pool. And literally, no one else landed a point on him, and I was the only one in the pool to land at the point because I was able to. One, I figured out his timing, so I just used Stringiri to time him, to get ahead of his tempo. But then I also was able to. He had a nice cut coming in from his right side, and I was just able to go. I didn't get him on the second cut for in that exchange, but I was happy I got a hit on him, and I got a false edge parry on him on somebody that I should have just like steamrolled me. Now, granted, no, the other exchanges he steamrolled me, but I got two exchanges where I felt pretty good about myself. So, yeah, Hutton tournament with a 1796 was the SoCal sword fight one. So. It is 1 hour 15. I need to sign off. Yeah, so there is a saber tournament at Combat Con, so that is something to consider. And I don't know what saber they're going to use yet. I know it's going to be provided for us. It's not going to be bring their own. So I love a good curve, one stab someone around their full guard. Yeah, that's fun too. I mean, I've done that with even more curved weapons, like more like a Shamshir kind of weapon. So that is kind of fun when you can get those false edge, like literally get those hits, hit someone with a false edge with a curved weapon. And then I did some Polish saber at TSL2 with Richard Mars, and that was kind of fun. So anyway, I do have to sign off, so I'm gonna leave it there. Like I say, may be going live on Wednesday, may not, will not be going live on Thursday. So if you don't see me live on Wednesday, I'm not going live until the following week. So just keep that in mind. So other than that, stay safe, keep training, and united through sabers.